We've been hearing good words, so just a few thoughts. I always come with slides because I want that the next time you read that passage, you read it with more clarity and more history to it. So I'm not a preacher, but more like a teacher. So for today's verse, I would like, for devotion for this brief time, I would like to turn to Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 to 4. If I may have the slide. And given the time is brief, I will be paraphrasing the text. Since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated on the right hand of God. Verse 2, set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. Almost in tandem to what Pastor has been preaching and how we have fallen short in God's expectation of bringing our praise, bringing our worship, bringing our lives, bringing our tithes to God. Here, Paul kind of encourages the church, telling them, you have been raised with Christ. I believe every believer sitting in this hall today, you have been raised with Christ, right? Since then, you have been raised with Christ. 2 commands. Set your hearts on things above. Set your minds on things above. There are things of the earth, there are things that is from heaven. There are things of the world, there are things that God specifically lays down as His plan and purpose for our lives. And a commandment for every believer is to set our hearts and our minds. What is the difference? Heart is where our deepest desires, our love, our affection, the force of our feelings, is our attachment to something. That is what the heart reflects. The mind is where you use the skill set, the faculties of your mind, of reason, of logic, of rationality, and so many things to achieve something that you desire. God says both these instruments, your mind and your heart, should, since you're raised with Christ, set your heart on things that God wants for us. That's the command. The follow-on verse says, because you have died, it's no longer you, but Christ who lives in through you. And if that happens on the final day, when Christ comes in His glory, you shall too come in His glory. The promise is right here. God is living, Christ is living in through you. And if you set your heart and mind on things of Christ, you will appear with Him in glory, not only in the world to come, but His promise also on this side of eternity. Our point highlight cheyan. We know, go to the first slide quickly. What time Jesus died? 3 p.m. So very quickly, the aspect of raising with Christ, to understand that it's very important to get a brief picture. So I'll very quickly run through you. So I have put some time sequence over there. It is approximate time. So around 3 p.m., Jesus dies on the cross. Between 3 to 6, he is buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. 6 o'clock, after 6 o'clock, nothing will happen because it's Sabbath time, right? From 6 o'clock Friday evening to 6 o'clock Saturday evening, the Jewish world is quiet. It is Sabbath day. And after the Sabbath day is over, what did the women do? They made some ointments, right? To apply on the body of Jesus. So Sunday morning, 3 a.m., most likely the earthquake happened, let's say the resurrection happened, the Roman seal was broken, and the tomb was empty. Early morning, around 5 or 6 o'clock, the women come to the tomb. What did they find? The tomb is empty. What did they see? So on the right side is all the verses over there. So stay on the first slide. They see the tomb is empty, and they see the angel come and tell them, why are you looking for the living one among the dead? Go and tell your brethren that Jesus is risen and He will meet them in Galilee. The women are petrified. Actually, Matthew, Mark, when we read it together, we see that the women do not go immediately to the disciples. They go and don't tell anything to anybody, according to Mark. Then Jesus appears to them again. See on the first slide? Jesus appears to them again, according to Matthew 28:9, and He tells them, He comforts them. Women, go and tell my brothers or the disciples that I will see them in Galilee. Okay? Now, at around morning, it's morning 8 a.m., 9 a.m., the women go and inform the disciples that we have seen the risen Jesus. What do the disciples do? Do they believe? They don't believe. They don't believe. Next slide. Mary Magdalene, I think she was the one who loved Jesus the most. There's a vacuum, there's a verse, right? He who has forgiven the most loves the most. Mary knows what Jesus delivered her from, right? So she insists, Peter, the body of Jesus is not in the tomb. When Peter hears that, around 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, when it is safe, Peter and John, they run to the tomb. Mary Magdalene also follows. They go in, they don't find Jesus. They find the cloth lying over there. They go back, but Mary stays there. According to John, Mary sees the gardener. He tells him, did you see Jesus? And what does that person tell him? Mary, it's I. Go and tell the disciples. So that's what happened at around 11 o'clock. Next slide. I'm talking about the first Easter Sunday. Sunday സംഭവിച്ച കാര്യങ്ങളാണ്. Sunday 2 മണി, around 2 o'clock. The two disciples, they leave Jerusalem. They're very sad because their expectation was the Messiah will be inaugurated, the new kingdom rule will come. അതൊന്നും സംഭവിച്ചില്ല. They're going back to Emmaus, which is 9 kilometers north. By the time 5 o'clock, they reached, by the time around 5 o'clock, they reached their village. But on the journey, they found a person traveling with them. And he asked him, why are you so sad? And the disciples tell him, you know the story. Are you not aware what happened in Jerusalem? And the whole interaction happens. But at 6 o'clock, sundown, so the Middle Eastern hospitality dictates that or a visitor or a guest, we cannot leave them. We have to invite them into the house. Because back in the day, by sundown, everybody goes to their homes and the doors are shut. So they invite this person. And when they break bread, what do they see? This is the risen Jesus. They immediately leave back to Jerusalem to inform the rest of the disciples that Jesus is risen. Right? That happens around 4 hours it takes to go from Jerusalem to Emmaus. Imagine they traveled back at night, back to Jerusalem again. So by 9 o'clock, they reach this place where the disciples are gathered. And they are there. So who are all there in that upper room? Can you show the picture of the upper room, quickly? Not that. That's the tomb of Jesus. Yes. This is the traditional site where all the disciples had gathered. And they were here. And when now who all are here? Peter, John, all the disciples, Mary Magdalene, and the two disciples who came back from Emmaus. Everyone is gathered here. And by 10 o'clock in the night, Sunday night, Jesus appears in the midst of them and tells them, peace be unto you. Why are your hearts troubled? I am not a ghost. Look at me. Touch at my wounds. Get ready. Go to Galilee. I'll see you there. Jesus disappears. What do you think happened next? Can you go back to the slide again? The last table. Jesus gave them this command, meet me in Galilee, but for 1 week. No. Go back to the table. Third slide. No. Yeah. Jesus tells them to meet me in Galilee. But, no, next slide, please. Yeah. Next one. Next. Okay, the slide's not there. Anyways, if you read the text in tandem, for 1 week they did not leave the room. Go back to the room, upper room. For 1 week they were in this room, they did not move. They were fearful of the Jews and the Roman authorities that since Jesus has been crucified, they would be the next. So for 1 week they did not move. We will only understand this when we read the 4 Gospels together. And then Jesus appears again after 1 week and tells them, Thomas first time Sunday Thomas was not there. 1 week had passed. And then the second Sunday when Jesus comes, Thomas is there, he shows. So we think Thomas was a doubting person. No, the whole group doubted. Because they were told to go to Galilee and meet him there. But they did not move from there. For 1 week they were there and Jesus appears again and gives them the same instruction. Thomas, touch me. It is I. I'm not a ghost. And then he eats something in their midst and tells them to go and meet in Galilee. The question was asked 3 times. Jesus repeated, meet me in Galilee. Is not Jerusalem the place where all the action has to happen? Why was 3 times in John, in Matthew, and Mark? Jesus repeated the instruction, go to Galilee. Next slide, please. Okay, that's here. This map shows the 3.5 years of Jesus' ministry, Jesus and his disciples traveled from Galilee to Jerusalem, touching all the towns and villages as they went from up and north. Galilee is 90 miles north from Jerusalem. So it takes 7 days of walking. So it takes 7 days to walk from Jerusalem to go up to Galilee. And every time Jesus would come from Galilee, he would use these routes to come going up and down in his ministry. So these are the routes of Jesus' ministry. Now Jesus has told them, go to Galilee. Most probably they will go back in the same route as they're going back to Galilee. Why did Jesus tell them to go to Galilee? This time, as they're walking back, Jesus is not with them. But they're going through every town and village and community that Jesus once walked with them. They might have met the people. They might have remembered Jesus' teachings, Jesus' parables, Jesus' healings, and might have met the people and all those who interacted with them along the way. This journey was important because partly this journey, everything that the disciples recollected, eventually became the New Testament. For the first 30 years after Jesus' death, there was no New Testament. The New Testament came later on. But this journey was important to recollect the life, the ministry, the teachings, the healings, everything that Jesus did, everything that we read in the New Testament was partly because of this journey that took through all the villages and towns that they again went back to Galilee. So, finally, Jesus പറഞ്ഞ സ്ഥലത്തിൽ അവരെത്തി. പക്ഷേ ജീസസ് സമയത്തിൽ വന്നില്ല. So what do we read in John? John 21. Peter said, this is too much. We might have hallucinated in Jerusalem. I'm going back to fishing. We read that in Gospel of John. And then he goes back to fishing. With him goes the rest of the group. All night they fish. They don't find a single catch. Early morning a voice comes from the shore. Put the net on the right side. John is the Kandabandane Peter, that's Jesus. Go to the next slide. Just hold on there. Peter said, John told Peter, this is Jesus. And we know the story. They come and Jesus reinstates Peter. All biblical scholars more or less agree this was the mountain. This was the place where Jesus had called all his disciples to come and meet him. This place in Galilee. It's called modern day Mount Arabel. So ഇവിടെയാണ് ജീസസ് എല്ലാ ഡിസൈപ്പിൾസിന് വന്ന് വരാൻ പറഞ്ഞത്. ഇവിടെ വന്നു ജീസസ് വരാൻ താമസിച്ചു ഡിസൈപ്പിൾസ്. So if you see this picture, that's Mount Arabel. A blue കാണുന്നത്, that's the Sea of Galilee, and there are mountains behind it. Go to the next slide. Next one. Next one. Yeah, this is the Sea of Galilee, and this is the view from that mountain. Jesus called all his disciples to meet him on that mountain. Our mountain in Inna, you can see the entire circumference of the Sea of Galilee. If you closely read the New Testament, 70% of Jesus' ministry, his teaching, his healing happened along this coast. All that Jesus did, majority, 70% of his ministry happened along the shores of this coast. Jesus wanted his disciples one last time to stand on that mountain and have a view. Next slide. ചില കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഞാൻ pinpoint ചെയ്തു. Point 1, that is the city of Magdala. അവിടെ വെച്ച Magdalene, Christ delivered her. Ginnassor, when the boat was troubled by the storm, finally it came and landed at Ginnassor. Point 3, Tabgha, this is where Jesus called Peter and Andrew, his brother. They received their calling over there. Point 4 over there, after Jesus mounted the Beatitude, the Sermon on the Mount that was given. Capernaum, Bethsaida, point 7, where Jesus fed the 5,000, and following the other place where the pigs were drowned. So in one vantage point, Jesus showed the entire ministry of his life to his disciples. Because he's about to leave, and he's about to pass his great commission to his disciples. And Jesus wanted them to have a look. This, the very ministry that I did, I will ask of you to do. So ഇവിടെ വെച്ചാ commission കൊടുത്തത്. But they have a choice. You can go back to the shores of Galilee and live like fishermen for the rest of your life, or you can come up to this mountain, receive this commandment from me, and be fishers of men. They can choose. What is Galilee? He disciples in a hometown. Galilee represents hometown for them. This is where they grew up. This is where their families are. This is where they learned to fish. This is where they were rich. This is a comfortable a secure, financially stable place. This is home for them. But if they are to receive that calling, the Great Commission on that mountain, that would mean they have to set their hearts and their minds on things that Christ has for them. They will have to die to the self, they will have to die to the plans and purposes of their personal lives and embrace what God is giving them. They will have to die, because what does that mean? Embracing the Great Commission means going back to Jerusalem again. The very place where they are the most weak, they are the most persecuted, they will be hounded, this is the most dangerous place. They will have to leave Galilee, their hometown, their comfortable area, going back to the dangers of the city of Jerusalem. We began with I'll close with this, we began with the verse, if you are raised with Christ, set your mind and your hearts on things that are from above. When Christ will come in his glory, so shall you. I'm happy the disciples took courage and received that calling on that mountain. They chose not to go back to the shores of Galilee, but they chose rather to go back to the dangers of Jerusalem to be there. And again, when the Lord gives us a calling from above, he will give you the power to accomplish that calling. We saw the photo of that upper room, right? Show that photo once more. So all the disciples, they came back to the same routes, the map that we saw. They came back here and they stayed here for the next 50 days. For the next 50 days, fearful that what will happen. They don't know what is going to happen. They waited on the Lord patiently as Jesus told them. Wait in Jerusalem till you are endured with power from above, and then go be my witnesses. When God entrusts us, when we are ready to yield ourselves, our hearts and our minds to things of God, he will grab hold of our lives, equip us with a commission. Not only that, he will send us where we don't naturally want to go. He will use us. He will show his power mightily in the areas which is most dangerous, or in the areas of our weakness, greatest weakness. There God will raise and do his work by the power of the Holy Spirit. And on the day of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit came upon the multitude that was sitting fearful in this room, doors and windows locked. And once the power came from up on high, the doors were open. The very Peter who ran away from that mountain to the shores of Galilee to fish, now came out boldly preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I'll close with this. If God has given you a vision, a calling in your heart, pursue it with all of your heart, with all of your mind. And if it is from God, God will use you in spite of your weakness, despite of your weakness. He will enable you with power to accomplish that great mission. May God bless you, and thank you for this time.
Thank you, Pastor Finny. Thank you for the blessed devotion. And like I said, we have